Woo! That new bike day, new bike ride feeling. Welcome to this James the Bike Guy, where today I'm going to be talking to you about the 5 things I do and I suggest you do on your first ride with a full suspension mountain bike. Today is a new bike day for me with this beautiful 2021 stump jumper in front of me here. But instead of going hog wild and just ripping it, I'm going to go through the 5 things to make sure it's totally dialed so tomorrow's ride and a year from now are going to be way better. So go ahead, stick with me, and let me take you through those 5 things. Now, believe it or not, task 1 isn't actually riding the mountain bike at all, but rather it's getting your saddle height set up. So with a saddle of the mountain bike, that's going to be really important to get you in the right position to be able to pedal well and be able to clear obstacles and things like that. Now, bicycles with a dropper seat post, you're going to want to set to your optimum pedaling position. And for most cases, that is for somebody with a 170-degree angle on their leg. So if we use my arm as reference here, at the bottom of the pedal stroke, you should have a slight bend. So you're not overextending, but you're also not putting pressure on your joints. Now, for riders that don't have a dropper post, you might want to set up your saddle just a little bit lower. So take your 170-degree angle and maybe reduce that by 10 or so degrees, making it about 160. What that's going to allow for is when you're on the saddle and you're all the way up, you can get your rump up and out of the way of the seat post so that it doesn't get in the way when descending or going through something technical. Now, step number 2 that you're going to want to do is also going to be pre-ride. What we're going to be doing is setting up the rear shock and the fork to our weight and setup. Now, most major manufacturers or quality ones like Specialized and many others, they're going to have an online tool to help you set up your suspension. So go ahead, jump on there, put in height, weight, any of the information they might need, and it's going to help spit out both the air pressures that you'll be putting in your front and rear shock, as well as the adjustments for it. So I went ahead and did that pre this ride, used my shock pump, set up the rear shock to 248 pounds and the front shock to 103. Now that's setting up baseline, not your entire ride. So later on in this group, we're gonna go through and adjust those on the trail. Now, step 3 is gonna be actually comfort and control. So when setting up a bike, especially when it's on a stand or maybe you pick it up from your local bike shop, the controls are going to be set up to either what you tried inside of your house building it like I did, or to what the mechanic that built your bike for you likes their controls. Now, just like with the whole bunch of things, what feels great for me, what feels great for you can often vary. So what I suggest you do, bring along with you a torque key or a torque wrench like this, so that as you're going down the trail, you can feel out how does the brake lever feel, how does the handlebar position feel, and then you can use your tool on the trail to adjust it. And because it's a torque wrench, you're going to get that click knowing that you haven't over tightened or hurt anything while you're out riding. With everything comfortable and set up, you can now focus on how the suspension's performing. You're going to want to pay attention to things like bottom out, whether or not it feels like a pogo stick, stuff like that, because what you have control over is your air spring, which is basically how much potential energy can be stored in the shock, and then you have control over your damping or rebound. Damping is compression, and rebound is how fast it comes back. So this isn't going to be a deep dive. However, a couple of things to mention. If you're going into, say, an area where it's repeated bumps, what you want to pay attention to is whether or not the bike's springing back super fast. That might feel kind of like a pogo stick and indicate that you should be slowing down the rebound. That'll slow down how fast the spring comes back. On the flip side, if you feel like it's packing out and you're not getting the responsiveness that you really should from the shock, you might want to speed it up. Now, you also have compression, which compression is the resistance to compressing that's not done by the spring, but rather the oil damping. And that is typically progressive from open to closed, closed being locked out, and you can kind of adjust that on the fly. Your last thing is to pay attention to bottom out. So on this bike, the 248 in the rear felt really good. And in fact, you can take a look, and through the trail ride, I've nearly bottomed out the shock, and in this kind of terrain, that's about right for the type of riding I'm doing. On the flip side though, up front, you can see I haven't totally bottomed out the front end. And that 103 PSI is maybe a bit too much for this bike. So what I'll go ahead and do, toss on my shock pump, let it read where we are, and let out just a little bit of air, and then try it out again. Now keep in mind, each time that you adjust the air spring of the shock, you then might need to adjust the rebound and the damping as well. So it's really important when you're out on the trail to do this on an area that you know well and that you can consistently do the same trail over again, so you can trial and error what's feeling right. The final thing we should pay attention to out on the trail are noises and things that just don't feel right. Now, a couple of those that might be there is stuff like your drivetrain. Is it clicking or not quite shifting through the gears? It's totally normal to have cable stretch happen where the housing compresses a little, which makes the cable stretch, and it comes out of adjustment. You might also notice some things like brake rubbing, which happened on this bike where the rear brake now seems to have a little bit of rub, and it'll need to get adjusted later. And stuff like suspension linkage coming loose too. So if you hear thuds, rattles, creaks, squeaks, stuff like that that you don't know, don't worry about it out on the trail unless it's really ailing the bike. Instead, enjoy your ride, take it to the bike shop afterwards, or put it on your own stand and diagnose what's going on. When I get back from this ride, I gotta adjust that rear brake. And that's about it. With those 5 steps, you should be able to have a pretty awesome ride on your bike and be ready for the next one. The last thing to mention before we close out is I really suggest doing this ride before you go out with a whole bunch of friends that are relying on you. Now, of course, if you're new to cycling, definitely bring a friend along, but expect the ride to be slow, fun, and really focusing on getting the bike to be dialed in. Well, anyways, thanks so much for watching this video. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments below if this was helpful. If it was, I'd love to hear it, but I'd also love to hear what kind of tips, tricks, or thoughts do you want to know about mountain biking? Well, again, thanks so much for watching. Hit that subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. That was a little bit bucky, so let's go ahead, slow that rebound down by a click.